Today, I'm bringing you guys Mike Giannotto, and Mike Giannotto is actually just joining our Pro Feedback platform this month. And I'm really, really excited to have him here. So, Mike, many of you guys have seen him before. You've heard his name. He's done tons of tutorials for us in Sync Academy. He's obviously one of our just really awesome, helpful members in just the entire Sync My Music community. And I used to do a lot of interviews and chats with him and Trevor on my podcast and YouTube channel back when the pandemic was kind of at its rage. So many of you guys have probably seen him before, but I do want to bring him on here so he can introduce himself, let you guys know a little bit about how long he's been in this business. He's actually been in this business longer than I have, so he actually has way more experience than I do. And what's really cool and unique about Mike and why I hand selected him and picked him to be one of our pros is that he's had both experiences of being a composer working for libraries and also now having his own library, running his own operation. So I think that's a really, really valuable set of ears to have on your music, right? Somebody who actually knows what it takes to not only get accepted by a library, but also be on the other end of the table, accepting music and saying, yes, your music is good, or no, this music is not ready. So if anybody on this earth knows what licensable music is, Mike is certainly one of them. So, Mike, thanks for being with us, man. Let us know just a brief history of your experience in sync licensing. How long ago did you get started, and where did you begin, and where are you now?
Yeah. So first off, thank you for having me. Yeah. So it was over 20 years ago, a little bit over 20 years ago. I started as a composer for picture, doing a lot of commercials. Actually, before that, how I got into doing music for picture was I was a drum and bass producer, put out records worldwide for a couple of years, and then basically a music house in New York had this idea of putting together actual artists for writing commercials as opposed to just jingle composers. So I got in the game that way about 2000, a little bit like maybe 98, 99, something like that. So but yeah, from there, I composed a lot of stuff, a lot of commercials for cars, like sneaker commercials. I did like rebrands for Comedy Central. I did show opens for MTV, all kinds of stuff. I got into doing a lot of library music, probably mid 2000s, maybe 2006, 2007. Got a lot of placements in stuff like The Real World and a lot of those early reality shows and stuff like that. And basically, jump to now. I've been, still composing and stuff like that, but I've also opened up my own shop called Reverse Play, and we focus a lot on, custom music and also library music for all kinds of stuff from commercials, mostly advertising commercials, trailers, that sort of thing. But we're also getting into like more interactive and internet kind of stuff too, like games and obviously the new like NFT stuff that's happening now, all that kind of stuff. So,
Awesome, man. Now, I want to jump into something here because you're obviously a library owner now. I imagine you get quite a few submissions from composers, and a lot of composers they get frustrated, right? And I understand because I was one of them at one point where you submit to a library, they say, "Hey, thanks for submitting. It's not quite right for us," but they don't obviously go that extra step to give you a lot of feedback and notes for it. Now, I understand why. Maybe you can also help us explain why, because this pro feedback service we put together, it's basically plugging in that missing service right there because a lot of producers, this is so common. If you guys are watching this and you've been just not responded to, or you've been given a sort of text, or like a template reply, which, people always ask me that, like, are they really not accepting composers or are they just not like my music? And I just go, I have no idea, because that could be an easy, polite way to say no thanks to anybody where you don't have to insult them and make them feel like they don't have good music. Or it could be true that they're really just not looking for composers, but we really can't mind read and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But why is it that libraries and ad agencies and these kind of people and music supervisors don't have the time to provide in-depth feedback? If you can maybe just help explain that.
well, yeah, first off, as far as the time goes, a lot of us are just really busy. We're not only just getting submissions, we're also getting requests from clients. So, which is, if you're doing your business right, like that's what you want to be getting most of the time. So, a lot of your time is spent dipping into your library, trying to find the right tracks, trying to find, or if it's a custom thing, trying to find the right composers and the right versions and stuff like that. So, that's where most of the time goes to. When you do have some free time, and not just free time but also free energy, because remember, these people, myself included, we're listening to music all day long, so you may send your track to me for a review, like you're a new composer, you may send your track like let's say 10 a.m., like business hours, when it's a great time to do that. but like by the time I can get to it, let's say it's the end of the day, and listening to another piece of music might be the last thing that I want to do. So might happen the next day, it might happen the next day. So that's as far as time goes. So you have to be kind of just patient with a lot of people. A lot of times, if especially if people like your music, they want to work with your music, even if they'll get back to you, even if it takes a couple of weeks. So a lot of times, like, what I'll do is, if there's something that really catches my eye, I'll put it aside, if I can't respond to it right there, or if I want to just listen to it with fresh ears at some point, make sure. So that takes care of that. On the other side, as far as level of quality, that's a different thing. So there's two sides. Like, when it comes to the music itself, there's two sides of it. There's like the quality of it, is how useful it is, and then also how useful is it to me, and what I do. So as far as level quality goes, mix is a big thing, arrangement is a big thing. And arrangement, not necessarily in the sense of like how complex or how innovative your score is, but mostly like, are you sticking to an emotion? Is it very clear what you're trying to do? Is it just one thing? That kind of thing. Is it very easy for a story to be kind of developed around that, or for it to support another story? So that's usually like a singular emotion. And then of course, mix and production, it plays a big thing too, because everybody, there's so much music out there, you want everything to sound finished, when you get it, and especially the way, as fast as things move these days, a track that comes in, it might be perfect for a job, but like, if there's musically, but if the mix just isn't there and it doesn't sound right for that job, and that job needs to ship today, unfortunately that track's going to get passed up. So those are different sides of it. Yeah, and the thing about it is, to find that, it takes time, and it takes, I found it through a lot of experience. I know a lot of people that are doing this pro feedback, the great thing about this is they get to kind of shortcut a lot of, like, maybe 10-12 years of my career. So it's been a lot of just like trial and error, and a lot of just sending stuff out, and like you're saying, Jesse, I don't know why something didn't place. I don't know why something didn't get taken. I put it up against, I'll even put it up against what did get placed, and be like, I think mine is better, but I don't necessarily understand until like maybe later, where it's like, oh, I get it. There's a synth line that I had, or there's this guitar part that was just covering up a little piece of the VO, and yeah, they could have told me to turn that down, but instead of going back and forth with me, they just decided to use another track that didn't have it. So sometimes it's just as simple as that. So I'll be here to like help people and help new composers and producers, just to kind of navigate that a little bit, and hopefully guide people towards towards placements a little bit quicker.
That's great, man. Yeah, and I love how you put that. I've said that many times, where like the services that I create, and the feedback service and all this kind of stuff, I do want to have people see it as, you're literally getting to take my brain and Mike's brain and our other pros' brains, and literally plug it into your brain, right? And you get decades. I mean, combined with all of us, there's probably over, I don't know, 50 years, maybe 70 years
Oh.
of sync licensing experience. So not only are you getting my perspectives, but you get Mike's perspectives, which are completely different than mine. And he's absolutely right. There is a part of this business that is very subjective, where that track that you think is not as good as yours might have gotten placed because whoever was in charge of placing it happened to be listening to some other artist that day and liked that music, and that track reminded them of that, and they're like, yeah, I like this. I'm guilty of that. I know there's many times where, if I'm just into a certain sound and I hear that sound, I'm like, oh, I just love this, even though it might not be the quote unquote right perfect track for a particular situation. But a lot of that stuff is completely out of our control. But if that's where you're at, where you're sometimes missing out on opportunities just because there was a subjective preference, you're actually succeeding. Okay, so I want people to know that doesn't mean that you failed or something like that. Many of our members, though, are not even to that place yet where their tracks would even be considered alongside other tracks. So we're trying to get you guys into the arena where then the subjective choices happen. So many of you guys are still kind of on the outside of that. And I think that's why you signed up for Pro Feedback, is because you want to get that professional ear to tell you, no, you're not quite there yet. And I always try to do that, and I know Mike's going to be doing that with his reviews, to let you know, just honestly, we're not going to try to pick on you or make you feel bad. But if that's what you want, if you want to be told the honest truth of what we really feel, we're going to tell you, you know what, I don't think this is ready for libraries yet. I think you got some work to do. Or I think this is ready for libraries. I'd be very surprised if you don't get a contract within the end of the month if you find the right one that could be ready for that. Because I've had actually tracks on both sides of that, and I know Mike, you will as well. So that honesty, that's what we really bring to this table to let you know, this is what you can do within your control to get yourself into that arena. Once it's in the arena, you got to kind of hands off and you just do the best you can. Like Mike said, you try to learn from the every experience. And if there is something that you can take away to say, I think there was something about that other track that was a little bit better than mine, or maybe more on, not better, but just more on target for the brief, you can kind of learn that stuff for sure. Mike, I want to ask you, like, you've been in this business a long time. Are there some golden things or some key things that you just know, no matter what kind of music you're producing or accepting from producers, you're always looking for? What are those things that you go, I got to make sure it has X, Y, and Z if I'm even going to take the time of day to accept it? What are maybe some of those aspects of tracks that you really look out for?
Yeah, so it's a little tricky because there's so many different uses for, different things. But I think a commonality is it has to do one thing well. That's the biggest thing. So, a lot of times when you're writing artist music, you can get away with like having a few different parts that are really cool on their own, and then you put them together and it makes this really interesting piece. Well, when it comes to this kind of stuff, there usually isn't time for that in a lot of these productions, right? So you have to do that one thing well. You have to have that hook. Whether that's a melody, whether that's like some crazy drum line, whether that's like some interesting sound design kind of thing, right? So yeah, I think that's really the biggest thing. I mean, as far as other golden rules, it's kind of tough to say because, like I think there's a level of quality when it comes to mixing and mastering that there's a threshold that you need to get above, in order to kind of be in the game. But like once you're there, I think the things that sets it apart is that hook, so it's really just like figuring out and this is kind of the cool and creative thing too, because each of us, we all have our own voices, we all have our own creativity, right? So it's a matter of taking the time to really hone into that and finding what that voice is for you, and even though there's like a brief may say like, okay, we need something in this feeling, or you need to hit a certain type of emotion that's for somebody else's project, you can still use your voice to bring that out because you're the only one that can do it in the way that you do it, right? So you find that like sort of one thing that you do really well and really harp on that.
Yeah, and I've noticed this with actually all of the interviews I've been doing with all of our pros. Focus. That seems to
Yeah.
be the number one thing across all genres and all notes that we're giving to people is if we're noticing a problem with your track, it's probably just because there's a lack of focus. Like Mike said, your track is not doing one thing very clearly and very efficiently. So the lack of focus could be your genres all over the place, right? It's like you have EDM elements and rock and orchestral and some country in there, and it's like I don't know where this is, I don't know when this is. It's just all over the place. Or you start with maybe a very particular emotion, but then we lose it, right? Something you add or some direction you went in, it's just so different that it's like, we usually don't want to really switch our emotions or our moods so much in one track unless specifically requested. There will be some requests by libraries will say, start somber and sad and lift us up into inspiration by the end. I've had those kind of opportunities. But unless you're being specifically asked that, you should really just stick with one track, one genre, or one mood rather, one emotion, right? And keeping it focused. And when you get that focus on like not just about creating high quality music that's fun to listen to and enjoyable, but also keeping that service mindset of like, well, I'm creating this track to serve a particular need. And that's the focus that Mike is talking about. That if it's a trailer track, okay, what are we trying to do with this trailer track? If it's an ad commercial track, what are we trying to do with that? If it's just a background attention track for a reality TV show or a contest show, what's the purpose of this track? What value is it bringing to that production? That's why we call it production music. It's providing some sort of production value to it. So I think when you guys come into pro feedback, you will be getting that kind of direct, honest feedback from Mike and myself. But not only that, you get to watch everybody else's reviews as well. And that's actually been one of the biggest benefits of this service that I probably undersold when I released the platform to our members. But it actually is quickly becoming probably the favorite feature of the platform that members are realizing, wow, to get to log in and watch literally hundreds of hours of music and tracks being reviewed by professional sync licensing producers, you are basically in the best online educational platform you could possibly be in because you're learning so quickly, again, plugging into our minds for the years of experience, what works and what doesn't work. And so it doesn't even have to be your track being reviewed for you to learn a lot of very valuable lessons on how to avoid some common mistakes. So for those of you that are in the platform, you should definitely be watching a lot of reviews, as many as you can. And for those of you that have not joined us yet, I encourage you to consider joining us. We'll put a link down below if you guys want to learn more about what we do here in Pro Feedback and how to get access to people like Mike and other really high quality pros. So, Mike, thank you so much for being with us, man. I really do appreciate your time. And I hope you guys do decide to join us and be part of this really cool platform we have going here.
Awesome. Thank you, man.